Before I retired and took up painting, watercolor in particular, my professional life was that of an architect. So I have an exposure to and involvement in art in the broadest sense because of my professional work and schooling. However, the nature of architecture is there is always a deliverable, tangible, which is a structure or a campus or a building. And though the avenues are art centric, they're not necessarily art in the sense we normally perceive art, which is a different set of structures to express oneself. So my own entry into the world of art as we commonly use the word is primarily thanks to COVID. When the lockdowns were enforced, I was looking for an avenue to keep myself engaged. I had already retired by then. And I saw an online course which was architectural watercolor. It seemed like good invitation. So I took that course, and whereas the architectural portion was easy, the watercolor part was not. So I decided then that I should focus on watercolor more specifically. And oddly, I started painting watercolor with a set of acrylic paints, diluted, because that's all I had available to me because I had done another art project which was more sculptural. But that's another story. I had done doodling, I had done sketching, both as part of work and as just while away time. So in a way, I bring some advantages that I bring to my watercolor, which is the skeletal part of watercolor, which is the composition, perspectives, the ability to draw, on which you apply watercolor to produce the finished work. I did have those advantages. Hope I'm using to its full value now. In terms of watercolor itself and my journey, which is now in my fourth year of painting, I liked the medium enough to want to do it and want to do it well. But it's not an easy medium. And I said to myself that in order to get better, frequency is important. And secondly, techniques are important. You might have the best inspiration, but without the techniques, your end product will fall short. So I made a conscious effort to paint at least 2 a week, record each of them so that I can see an evolution happening. Because like any endeavor, if you do not make progress, you lose interest. It's just the nature of the beast. And if you do make progress, your ego is stoked and you're likely to make even more progress. Do whatever it is your art is, do it frequently, do it in a student mode, because there are hundreds who are doing it well, better than you, and they know techniques and methods, which today, thanks to YouTube and the like, is freely available. It's tempting to say I'm self-taught. I'm not. I'm self-learned. There have been hundreds of teachers on YouTube who have generously given me their experiences from which I have benefited. So I would encourage whoever is planning to take up any form of art to make use of these resources. Though I still feel for certain types of art, there is really no substitute, including watercolor perhaps, no substitute for a real teacher. When I started painting, not knowing what I wanted to paint, I still don't, but it's narrowing in my own. I painted all kinds of things, good urban landscapes, no still life and no portraits. These two I have not done, but cityscapes, pure landscapes, panoramic views, till I could sort of sense what I wanted to paint. And what I'm drawn to today is primarily landscapes, but with some man-made element in it, a structure, a fence, a lamppost, a distant road, a cabin somewhere, a barn, abandoned factory, whatever it is. But they are essentially landscapes where you are a viewer as opposed to a person in the painting. If you did a streetscape, for example, you are, as a painter, in that street. Whereas if you painted Mount Rainier, you're looking at Mount Rainier. But you need to bring some, I feel, need to bring some human reference. So I either introduce or look for a landscape with something that had a human influence. That I'm drawn to that. Some of the paintings are from photographs of my own personal travel, but that's not the majority. There are, once again, very generous people who on Facebook and others have formed groups where they offer photographs for artists to paint, shrugging copyright issues. I mean, it's a global community. And you want to paint something in Belarus, you can paint tomorrow something from Belarus. And then you have also the opportunity to post your painting on the site as a thank you to the photographer, the painter for his or her validation from a community, and the photographer as a tribute. Let me go broadly to speak, if I may, about what I perceive art to be. All art, I think, is perceived by us through our senses. So broadly, they're all sensory arts. But what makes art different from the way we commonly use our senses, so touch, smell, sight being the most important, hearing, and taste, is that we use some combination of these senses as a sixth sense to present something non-utilitarian with our senses. So if you took cooking, for example, you have covered the senses of aroma, taste. Visual is always dominant in everything. And so we have, even when we cook, and normally we do this when we have a sadhi or a Thanksgiving or any such major event, that is an exhibit of art, of that type of art, which is in this case cooking. So I see it's an accentuated form of our senses responding to create or to view. So that is, to me, once I define it like this, I also see art in more things than what might be actually be called art. Because your own senses in some combination are in admiration and in joy of something that to you feels like it's art. The definition is yours. The perception is yours. In my own current journey of watercolor, it's essentially visual, but there is a sensory adventure when the pigment water-loaded brush hits the paper. There's a sensory, the sense of touch and the joy of the colors that flow out of it. Most of us think art as something outside of us, but it comes out from inside of us. The challenge and the joy is to rearrange that photograph, both physically and even chronologically. An example would be, it's very common for artists to remove a lamp where they don't want it, move a car somewhere else, add a figure, add a sign, and so on. But you can also do a time warp. You can make a scene. If the photograph is a sunset, you can make it sunrise or midday. You can also do a longer historical time warp by making, like Hollywood does, by introducing a few elements that date it. Using the same framework, you suddenly have, you can make a building abandoned, perfectly normal building look, totally abandoned, isolated, far away. So there is this outlet. And the difference between the photograph and the painting in general is that the camera's limitation is it captures light in that fraction of a second, it absorbs the information. And it gives you ruthlessly what it observes. But it takes this sixth sense of art to take that image and convert it to something that speaks of people, place, time, history, even beyond the photograph. But all these go back to techniques. These are all methods beyond the actual physics of painting. Some people view this as the left and the right brain in that sense, one having control over the rational, the other having control over the emotional, not necessarily irrational. Speaking from my own experience, what the technical side of my training brings the skeleton of a painting in this analogy, and it helps me plan a painting. And this, for me, the transition between that and the painting is a sketch. I almost always do graphite sketch of what I'm going to paint. And in that sketch, you are distilling the image, eliminating things, you're making the light fall the way you want it, independent of the photograph. You're eliminating what you don't want to paint. You are defining the values of light, tonal values. You're also planning what color to use, stages to paint. All this basically stems from the left or right, I don't know, the technical side of the. Then there is the emotional side or the artistic side, is what I think in my case needed to evolve, and it is still evolving, and my chances are it'll continue to evolve as long as I paint. So it's people say there's often a myth, I think, that for perhaps some geniuses it may be true that they have a flair. You hear of great musicians who just know music. There are great painters. But for the average person who seeks to paint or sculpt or strum a guitar, there is a process. That is, till you get to a comfort level, I would even say it's probably 75% technical and 25% is your art side. And that starts shifting with the ease with which you start doing the technical side. It's unavoidable. Sistine Chapel, he planned it. He didn't just get up there and say, give me that color and start. No. For those who say, oh, I'm not artistic, that's, I think, a bit of a myth. You may not be very good, but we are all artistic. Once you see it, you can do it. Not perhaps well, not perhaps great, not in a short time, but we can do it. There's a boot camp, there's a failure camp, there is a block, all of which these are hurdles you can cross. One of the things that happened to me and perhaps many others without a teacher is that you look at YouTube and there are unbelievable talent out there, really extraordinary. And you overnight want to paint like each of them. I wish I could paint like that. I wish I could, whoever it is. And then it dawns on you, you're basically failing copying. Not that there's anything wrong in copying, if it suits you, fine, but you're failing all the time. So I have come to the conclusion style is something you become and not something you strive for. It is probably others who will notice your style and not you. We all go into comfort zones of painting or whatever the art form is. And others start recognizing it as a style, but in the early stages, what they're saying is you're painting the same thing. So it's actually a flag for you to challenge yourself more or expand yourself. So I have gone through that. When people say there is a style and I haven't even thought about it, it means you're in a rut. Yes, I think at the moment others are noticing in what I paint. By seeing it, they know who did it. That level of recognition is there. But style, like technique, will evolve over time. But there are masters whose styles are so unbelievable. There are flaws in everything. I don't think there's any perfect art. The artist knows there are flaws. So that's comforting. I think that's one of the things that I do, which is I don't post on Facebook often, but every quarter I simply post an urge for people to put pigment on paper, strum a string, or all it takes is a pencil and the back of an envelope is my sort of my mantra. And some people have done this because it really takes I think we have a fear. We first overcome that fear, the fear of being inadequate, the fear of being compared to something else. It's your journey. It's your window on a train. Whether you see outside or not, it's up to you. In generally speaking, if you want to embark on a journey of any form of art, pick one or two mediums or avenues you like. You are the only audience. You are the only critic of your work. Be kind to yourself. Paint a lot. Learn techniques. Be technical. Because every even holding a pencil is a technique. Go through those bootcamp steps. There is benefit. You must want to do it. Without that, you may be even wasting your time. Broadly, there are art forms that demand an audience. All of them do. By audience, I mean someone else to look, enjoy, admire, and praise and applaud. And it's very obvious in the performing arts that that is a necessity. An orchestra simply cannot practice and say we have enjoyed ourselves. They have to perform. Similar with probably the solo instrumentalist is an exception. He can just enjoy himself. But uh, anyway, but there are art forms like painting, sculpture, which while an audience is not essential, it helps. It helps because, as I said earlier, it boosts your ego in a positive way when people like your work, admire it, and share it, whatever. A platform like Artsee does that for many. It is not, I don't see it as a site where on a filtered arts are presented as acceptable of a stage, etc., which makes the beginner, someone like me who's still in the beginning stages of painting, present their progress to fellow artists, friends, relatives, and anyone else who might be interested, and say, "Look, I've done this. Take a look." And it's gratifying when someone sees it and says, "A wow," or even specifically say, "I like this painting." So I think that morale boosting, ego boosting facet of doing art is met through a site like Artsee. I'm not, for me to put up, say, 60, 70 paintings. I don't know how many I can. I have not filled the capacity to simply with a click send it to someone and say, take a look. It's extraordinary.